Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 may just be my favourite film ever. I mean, how many good Marvel sequels can you think of?
I want my board.
Well, okay.
I'm actually struggling to think of one now, right in this. Oh, no, Winter Soldier. But let's go broader. How many good sequels do we actually get? Not many, because it's difficult. Most series never expect to go beyond the original, and when they do, it's usually diminishing returns. This leads me to ask, what makes a good sequel? Now, this question is far too vast to answer in this smallish video format. However, James Gunn, with the utmost confidence, gives us an answer. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 has everything I loved about the original. However, there's more distinct music choices that directly relate to the plot and themes, more subtle, complex storytelling that brings even more emotional nuance to these characters, more creative, beautiful shots with a focus on mids and wides, all packaged in a fun superhero movie. Furthermore, Gunn recontextualizes elements from the original film in a manner that is critical and reflective. I'd never expect to observe that in a regular film, even less so in a superhero movie. Gunn has trust in his characters and writing, which manifests on screen. I'm going to attempt to keep it clear and concise. However, it's inevitable that I'm going to reiterate common points about the film. There's no avoiding that Lindsay Ellis and Red Letter Media are inspirations to my video making as a whole. A massive element of what made the first film outstanding was the late 70s, early 80s pop soundtrack. Not only did the music keep you hooked and create tone, it was thematically relevant.
And when I first came into Hollywood and started making movies, I was astounded that people were not choosing songs for the movie until after the movie, was finished. And sometimes not even, already edited and putting songs in, not even editing to the songs, which I thought was just ridiculous.
In Volume 2, James Gunn is keeping that up. We still get the pop hits, however, they hit harder. A distinct anthem for the film is Fleetwood Mac's The Chain, which could be characterized as the greatest breakup song of all time. When a rift forms in the Guardians, mostly due to Quill and Rocket's actions, they split off into separate groups, to the tune of Fleetwood Mac. The chain has been broken, it may never be fixed. As the lyrics say, if you don't love me now, you will never love me again. Thus, the Guardians break up. However, the chain works both ways. It may at its core be a breakup song, but it's also about connection. Humans being linked. Like a chain. At the climax of the film, when all the Guardians have worked together in rhythm against Ego, Fleetwood Mac re-emerges. They are all on the brink of death, but not alone. The chain keeps us together. Furthermore, Gunn is a genius. This is a complex movie. You can interpret Peter and his father Ego's irrevocably broken relationship at the climax as the chain breaking on another level. One that is required and final. Speaking of Peter's parents, Meredith Quill, Peter's mum, is another major aspect of why the music works. That there is an in-universe reason for its existence. Peter's Walkman. This is the music Peter's mother listened to. She lives on in this music. It acts as a final piece of Quill's mother and is why he's so hesitant to open her final gift in the first movie. This is the last part of his mother left. To open it is to accept that she is dead and no new memories or notions of her will ever exist. This music is a part of what makes him him. It's his taste, passed on from his mother.
There's a girl in this harbor town and she works
Looking Glass's Brandy acts as a bonding song for Meredith and Ego in the opening of the film. However, more importantly, Ego weaponizes the song against Peter. Ego uses it to ease Quill into the idea of immortality and to explain why Ego left Meredith behind, and why Peter must leave his friends behind.
The sea calls the sailor back. He loves the girl, but that's not his place.
Gunn took an element of the first film that was innocent and even helped save the day, and critically reevaluates it for the second film. Peter loves that music. Of course it makes sense that he would have a soft spot for these songs and be open to manipulation. And Ego knows just the buttons to push. It's why the destruction of Peter's Walkman hurts. I present that Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is a film distinguished by James Gunn's ability to dig deeper into all the elements. Thus we get complicated, fun pop songs and niche, lesser known songs that can both bring life and emotion to scenes in ways you'd never expect.
Songs are so important. The music is so important. It's such an important emotional element of the film-going experience. You'd think people would take more care with it. And so that's why the score and the soundtrack is so incredibly important to me.
Cat Stevens' father and son playing at the conclusion of the film hardly requires explanation. And I very much will talk about that final scene later in the video. James Gunn takes his characters from the first film and manages to dig deeper, with a narrative that is nuanced and emotional. Everyone's going through shit, and this section of the video could easily escalate in length. Thus, I'm going to attempt to keep it concise, but the movie's dense and I can't get to everything. Let's start with the easy ones. Baby Groot is a child and mostly acts as a way to shift the Guardians' dynamic from group of misfits to makeshift family. Baby Groot does have a kind of mini-arc about learning to follow instructions, as evident with Rocket and the bomb at the climax as compared to earlier on. Drax is perhaps the most emotionally stable of the bunch, especially now he's moved on from his bloodlust revenge mission. Additionally, Drax has no shame or filter, and thus has no issues being emotionally honest or open.
You Earthers have hang-ups.
That being said, Drax acts mostly as comic relief. Although, you could argue he learns how to express his feelings towards others in a more compassionate manner in regards to his relationship with Mantis.
You are horrifying to look at, yes.
It's beautiful.
It is. And so are you.
Gamora is where our Guardians start to get complicated. She has the most sense of the group, and is quickly willing to call out the nonsense of Peter and Rocket. However, due to the abuse from her adoptive father Thanos, Gamora doesn't want to let anyone in. This trauma is most demonstrated with Gamora's relationship to her sister, Nebula, who also suffered due to Thanos' abuse. However, Nebula feels perhaps justifiably that Gamora let her down as a child by mercilessly beating her in fights Thanos forced upon them, resulting in brutal abuse being sent exclusively towards Nebula.
So after I murder my sister, I will buy a warship with every conceivable instrument of death. I will hunt my father like a dog and I will tear him apart slowly.
Throughout the movie, Nebula is trying to hunt down and kill Gamora, and as much smarter people have said, while you haven't literally been in a space fight with your siblings like this, you probably have been in a fight that felt like this.
Representation of what exists internally in many siblings' lives and in their relationships. This need to one-up one another, this unspoken need to vanquish the other.
By the end of the film, they both start to come to terms with their trauma and even bond. This allows Gamora to begin coming to grips with her trauma and flaws, as well as potentially bringing down the emotional walls she was forced to put up. Down the road, maybe she could be open to a more romantic relationship with our main character, Peter Quill. Speaking of our lead character, it's extraordinarily refreshing to see a superhero sequel treating its main character's behaviour in a critical manner. Peter's pop culture references and general immature behaviour are treated as flaws for him to overcome as to be a more fulfilled person. This is most demonstrated in his relationship with Gamora. Peter continually doesn't understand why they can't be a couple. However, at the same time is challenged by the fact Gamora is using guns now.
I thought your thing was a sword.
We've been hired to stop an interdimensional beast from feeding on those batteries, and I'm gonna stop it with a sword.
It's just swords were your thing and guns were mine, but...
Peter is unable to accept that Gamora may not be ready to let people in due to her own trauma. Quill even loses his temper and can't rationalize why this doesn't match his idolized childhood memories of Earth and relationships that he interprets through Cheers.
That's why it would get 0 ratings!
I don't know what Cheers is!
The fact is, neither Peter nor Gamora are ready for a relationship. They still need to overcome their own flaws. This leaves Quill perfectly open to being exploited by his biological father, Ego, who acts as an external force to splinter the Guardians' newfound family bond. However, that family bond is already under stress before our villain even appears in the film due to internal forces, or more specifically, ego. Our character's ego. This is shown through Peter and Rocket. They both have chips on their shoulders and allow their ego to take over. As Gamora states,
Either one of you could have gotten us through that field, had you flown with what's between your ears instead of what's between your legs.
Rocket has a similar journey to go on like Quill, except Rocket is incredibly hurt and broken due to how and what the world has done to him. Rocket is an asshole to everyone except Baby Groot and pushes them away like it's nothing, because he's scared of getting hurt. This makeshift family and love that is a part of it reminds him just how empty he is. Hence, Rocket steals batteries he doesn't need and is a dick to everyone as to save himself from feeling anything, both hurt and love.
Hope Daddy isn't as big of a dick as you, orphan boy.
What is your goal here? To get everybody to hate you? Because it's working.
Yondu pretty much spells this out to him in an amazing dramatic scene. Speaking of Yondu, he acts as a catalyst to aid Rocket to at least partially overcome these flaws. Yondu, funnily enough, becomes the emotional crux of the film. As Peter's adoptive and at times abusive father, he's got some issues he needs to work out.
Is that what you've been filling your head with, boy? Sentiment?
But it's not until Yondu quite literally loses everything, his relationships, his honor, his crew, his ship, his arrow, that he is able to realize what's important. Peter, his son, and that's why he's so quick to come to his aid against Ego. Yondu needs to let go of this lie that he doesn't care about Peter, and when he does, he's able to become something bigger than himself.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
In the climactic moment of the film, Yondu can remind Peter that what's important isn't power, immortality, or being special. It's heart.
I don't use my head to fly the arrow, boy! I use my heart!
This is in contrast to Ego, the villain and Peter's biological father. Ego is an immortal god who has lived for many eons. Ego has found humanity and existence lacking, hence Ego has searched for divine purpose in an ultimate expansion where he becomes everything in existence. Ego requires a second god of the same DNA for the expansion, and thus Kurt Russell has and screwed his way around the galaxy to get offspring with the hope of an heir. Peter's the first to properly carry the celestial genes, and while I think Ego is finally happy to not be alone,
I am truly not alone!
Peter is also a means to an end to finally fulfill his purpose. Thus, Kurt Russell manipulates Peter and exploits his flaws, telling him everything he wants to hear, that he's special and has powers. Exploiting Peter's own insecurities, such as Peter's lack of super abilities in the group and perceived lack of a father figure. Yondu, who certainly isn't perfect, through his own journey, is finally able to embrace emotion and heart. In contrast, Ego views friends, family, and emotion as weakness and consequently annihilates it in the metaphorical way and the literal way. This is most evident with Ego's perhaps one actual love in Meredith Quill, to which he inflicts brain cancer on as to have no temptation. Finally, at the end, Yondu is able to accept what actually matters to him, allowing for some redemption. But it's something bigger. It's legacy. Legacy in Peter, his son who's a galaxy guardian. Unlike Ego, who has no legacy and is obliterated into nothingness. James Gunn conveys a complex emotional narrative, one that puts character and heart first. One that's willing to accept its characters may be flawed, but not beyond redemption. Reading this section back, I realized just how dollar shop Lindsay Ellis at points it sounds. I could change it, however, I feel that would be dishonest to my interpretation of the film, one that Ellis has clearly vocalized much better. In this section, I want to discuss the step up in filmmaking, mainly the visuals, and how James Gunn uses imagery to subtly tell his story. Firstly, the camera is far more dynamic. It's often moving and sweeping in scenes. Additionally, we get really creative and effective sequences. Overall, there's far more stable mids and wides to appreciate. It's not without flaws, and with a more dynamic camera, we do start to notice the seams of the CGI. However, when the visuals are this bold and creative, it's easy to look past the faults. Beyond the step up in camera technique, James Gunn is really poignant with the storytelling on a visual level. For example, the opening sequence with dancing baby Groot acts as a fun, creative, one-take action sequence to kick off the movie. Additionally though, it feeds into the movie's main themes of parenthood. Each of the Guardians gets a moment to nurture baby Groot. Another example, and a perfect poignant point, is where Drax is reminiscing about his now dead wife and daughters. God bless Dave Bautista, he's really good, and as Drax in this moment shows no emotion. However, Mantis, who is an empath, reads him and breaks down crying in grief. This is an effective, subtle way to express what Drax is feeling without him stating it to the audience. I like this, it's touching and nice. Furthermore, another perfect poignant point, I guess that's what I'm calling them, is where Gamora is sitting alone on Ego's planet, in a moment of nearly silence. Except for two plant stalks that are rubbing together, which she gets annoyed at and cuts them down. This is a great way to subtly express to the audience that Gamora is feeling alone and perhaps even wants to be alone. At the climax of the film, when everyone is on the brink of death, Yondu explains to Peter that it's all really about heart. Now, there's a temptation to play Peter's recovery big, to have a loud score or soundtrack. Instead, the moment is played quiet. Images flash as Peter channels what truly matters to him. It's a really effective moment, and one of my favourites of the movie. One final perfect poignant point is that in death, ego implodes into a disgusting sludge. In contrast, Yondu becomes beautiful space ashes spread across the galaxy, which is a nice segue into our final scene of the film. In 2017, I saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 on opening night. I'll be honest, I didn't love it. It wasn't light-hearted like the first.
Ooh, child, things will get brighter.
The Guardians spent most of the movie split up. Yet, in re-watches, I've come to really love this film, to engage with its depth of characters, emotional maturity, and its heart. Nothing more perfectly demonstrates everything I've explored throughout the video than the final scene. The music, Cat Stevens' Father and Son, is powerful and at face value about Yondu, except it goes deeper. It's about Pete and baby Groot. Chris Pratt's speech that sometimes that thing you've been looking for your entire life to fill the void is right beside you is remarkable. This is Peter and Yondu in their father-son relationship, Gamora and Nebula as sisters, and Rocket with his found family. Peter and Gamora are finally able to embrace, but with an appropriate hug. A demonstration that some relationships go deeper than romantic attraction. Our final shot is of Rocket crying, as he realizes that even though he was an asshole and pushed away the people who most cared about him, it's going to be okay, they still love him. Sorry Casablanca, sorry Citizen Kane, I like the movie with the crying CGI raccoon and the baby tree.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe.
They're called harbulary batteries.